Okay, so right in the heart of Europe, it looks like a military giant is waking up. Spurred on by the war in Ukraine, Poland has kicked off one of the most ambitious military buildups we've seen this century. But if you look past the headlines about massive spending and shiny new gear, there's a much more complicated story unfolding, a story of huge ambition versus some very tough realities.
So what's with this number? Well, this is the slice of its entire economy that Poland is planning to pour into defense in 2025. We're talking 4.7% of its GDP. Now that's not just a big number, it is by far the highest share of any country in the entire NATO alliance. I mean, it just blows the 2% guideline completely out of the water.
So what does that kind of money actually buy you? It's about way more than just equipment. It buys a vision, right? A truly grand ambition to completely redraw the security map of Europe.
And their goal? It could not be clearer: to build the largest and most powerful land army on the entire continent. With an increasingly aggressive Russia right on its doorstep, Warsaw is gearing up to be the front line, the absolute bulwark of NATO's eastern flank. This isn't just about playing defense. This is about deterrence on a scale we haven't seen in a long time.
Of course, a powerful army needs soldiers, and Poland's target number is 300,000 military personnel by 2035. Just to give you an idea of how big that is, that's more than double the size of its armed forces from just a decade ago. It's a colossal undertaking.
Now, to equip this massive force, Poland has gone on what you can only describe as an unprecedented global shopping spree. So let's take a look at the hardware that makes up what seems, at least on paper, like a totally unstoppable arsenal. And you know what's really fascinating here is where all this gear is coming from. We're talking about the best of the best from the US. Abrams tanks, F-35 stealth fighters, those famous HIMARS rocket launchers, and Patriot missile defense systems. But at the exact same time, they're making these huge deals with South Korea for K-2 tanks, K-9 howitzers, and F-A-50 jets. They're literally sourcing a high-tech arsenal from the top players in the world.
And check this out for some perspective. By 2030, Poland is planning to have around 1,100 modern tanks ready to go. Now, look at that chart. That's more main battle tanks than the UK, Germany, France, and Italy will have, get this, combined. That is a truly staggering concentration of armored power. So on paper, you'd think, case closed, right? Poland's a superpower. But the brutal, grinding reality of the war next door has become a real-world stress test for everyone's military plans, and it's starting to reveal a very, very different story for Poland.
And this quote from security expert Robert Chuleta just hits the nail on the head. The fear isn't about the quality of the tanks or the jets. The real worry is whether the entire system that supports it all, the logistics, the training, the doctrine, is actually ready for the test of a real war.
And that really brings us to the heart of the matter, the potential cracks in Poland's otherwise formidable armor. Analysts are starting to point to some pretty critical weaknesses that the war in Ukraine has really thrown into the spotlight.
And look, we are not talking about minor details here. The issues range from big gaps in modern tech, like drones, to absolute logistical nightmares. Problems with recruitment, and even really fundamental questions about strategy and, crucially, ammunition. So let's dive into some of the biggest ones. Okay, first up, the drone gap. The skies over Ukraine have proven, without a doubt, that small, cheap drones can totally change the course of a battle. But experts are warning that Poland has been pretty slow to develop its own mass drone warfare plans. And, maybe even more importantly, its ability to counter enemy drones.
Now you might think this is all just theory, but no. This actually happened. A Russian drone flew over 100 kilometers deep into Polish airspace, completely undetected, before it just crashed. I mean, talk about a shocking wake-up call. It showed a very real, very scary vulnerability in their air defense.
All right, next up is the logistical nightmare. Think about it. How on earth do you repair, maintain, and supply American tanks, Korean jets, and various European missiles all at the same time, especially in the middle of a war? It means separate supply chains, different mechanics, totally different training. It is a monumental challenge.
You know, someone on a public forum actually nailed it with this comment. Calling it a huge smorgasbord of equipment is perfect. While having all that diverse gear gives you options, it also creates this massive logistical puzzle that could become a critical failure point under the pressure of combat.
So we've talked about the hardware, but what about the people? That massive goal of a 300,000-strong military is slamming up against some cold, hard reality. Things like demographics and a really competitive job market. Simply put, the recruitment drive is slowing down.
And if you look at the recent numbers, the trend is not going in the right direction. After getting 16,000 new recruits in 2023, they'd only managed to bring in 10,000 by the middle of 2024. At the end of the day, you just can't run a supersized army if you don't have the people to fill the ranks.
But this next one, this might be the most alarming part of the whole story. This is a stark warning from the head of Poland's own National Security Bureau. He said they have enough supplies to last for maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks! Now compare that to the years-long war of attrition we've seen in Ukraine, and you really see the massive gap between what Poland needs and what it actually has.
Okay, so you've got all this shiny new gear on one side and these huge weaknesses on the other. Why does that gap matter so much? Not just for Poland, but for everyone. Because Poland's role in European security has become absolutely undeniably critical.
Well, it's because Poland is basically where the rubber meets the road for NATO. It is the frontline state, sharing borders with Russia and Belarus. And crucially, something like 90% of all military aid headed to Ukraine flows right through its territory. Any weakness in Poland is a weakness for the entire alliance and for the entire effort to support Kiev.
And believe me, the stakes are already getting higher. After repeated drone incidents like that one we just talked about, Poland took the very serious step of invoking NATO's Article 4. That means calling for formal consultations with allies over a threat to its security. The theoretical weaknesses are already having very real-world consequences.
And this whole situation isn't just being talked about by generals and military bloggers. It's a topic of intense strategic analysis across the board. Policy institutes are digging into how Poland's rise is shifting the entire center of gravity in Europe. Its growing power creates new opportunities, for sure, but it also creates potential friction with its own allies.
All of this really brings us back to that one huge question. Is Poland successfully building NATO's new powerhouse, a military that can actually deter and defeat any enemy? Or is it a paper tiger with a tough-looking exterior that's hiding some really critical vulnerabilities? The answer to that question, well, the security of all of Europe might just hang on it.
Thanks for watching. If you learned something new, smash that like button. Drop your thoughts on Poland's military in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into global power plays. Because here at Intel Prime, we know power isn't always loud, but it's always strategic.